Welcome back to the second hour of the show. Ermanni Networks with Maz. It's Wednesday, so you know Anson Wells is in, and it's Wednesday, so you know who else is joining the show. None other than the best voice in radio NFL. Right. He's Dan Miller. Dan, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Dan.
How you doing, guys?
We're doing great. How was Thanksgiving, first and foremost? How was your holiday?
Thanksgiving was great. With about a minute to go, I was a little worried, but Thanksgiving was great, and then dinner tasted great. It's it's one of those things. You're sitting there thinking, man, if this doesn't go well, I'm not going to be in a great mood at dinner tonight. But Bears found a way to kind of screw that thing up. Lions took advantage, and off you go, and 10 in a row.
Have you ever seen a game end like that, Dan, in your life?
Man, that was surreal. I mean, it was just because you're watching it and you're just waiting for them to do something. Mm-hmm. You know, call timeout, run a play, do something. And, you know, I'm up there with guys that have a lot of stripes in this league, and Lomas and TJ, and they're both like, how are they not using a timeout? How are they not going to the line? How are they not making a play? And it was just, I think for the Bears, it was just a confluence of bad circumstances. I think you have a coach that froze, and I think you have a quarterback that, you know what, maybe next week, maybe next year, he calls a timeout in that situation. I think any veteran quarterback would have noticed that thing getting away from him and taking a timeout. But, I mean, he's back there, and I think that kid's got a lot of talent. But he's back there, 17 seconds to go, say, you over here, you over. It's like, fellas, you had 31 seconds from the time of the sack to do something different. And obviously the head coach didn't survive all that. But it was just a mess.
Yeah, the head man failed Caleb Williams in that moment. You saw the head man and DJ Moore on two different complete pages at the end of the game. Like, how does that happen? Yeah. How does the guy happen on the interception? Not the interception, but the Hail Mary. You know, this was a time coming for Eberflus. Short week for us. Obviously, we know how important tomorrow's game is and what the massive game and the ramifications are. But just quickly, Chicago Bears. Lions scored 7 in the second half, and then you see what the Chicago Bears were able to do in basically the last 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. Where are you with that game as it relates to offense and defense before we get into Green Bay?
Yeah, I think there are times this year where we've seen this offense that has run up, 5-6 straight possessions where they've gone complete games without punting. And then there are times, like most in this league, where they'll run into a little bit of a rut, have some empty possessions. And when you do that in this league, you leave yourself vulnerable. And I think that's what happened in that game. I think, look, they obviously have one of the best offenses in the league, but it is about consistency. It's about getting first downs. And that's one thing that Dan Campbell says a lot is, man, when we get that first down in a drive, we're off and running. But when we don't get that, then he knows that there's going to be bogged down a little bit. So, look, I think you easily could have put that game away, scoring a couple more times in the second half, maybe even one more time in the second half, to where Chicago isn't able to get back into that thing. But I think as I look at this offense, I feel pretty good about where it is. I think the concerns are on the other side of the ball right now with the injuries. Certainly I don't think we have any reason to believe Taylor Decker's going to play this week. But Braylon, I just think it's an offense that most of the time is pretty consistent. That was one of those times, like we saw in the first half of the Houston game, different thing, not a ton of turnovers like that. But there have been times where we've seen them just, not be the 30 points a game offense that we're accustomed to seeing.
I think the problem, Dan, is you're 100% correct. See, we as Lions fans, like, this winning thing is new to us. These big scores and blowing people out is new to us. So when it doesn't happen, it's easy to get scared and revert. If you just watch the Kansas City Chiefs, they're always in a close game. They always have games where they play bad in the red zone and they find ways to win. So you found a way to win. I think that's all we need to take of it. You said this
and I'll say this. I agree with you, and I think that's been one of the things that's jumped out about this team is they've won in so many different kinds of ways. Sometimes their offense hasn't been terrific. Sometimes their defense hasn't been terrific. Now, look, for the most part, they've both been really good, and the rankings show that. But on the given week where maybe one of your three phases isn't clicking, the other ones have found a way to pick it up. I mean, they got a 180-point differential this year, which is by far the best in the league. And you said it. I mean, all respect to Kansas City, no disrespect intended, but, man, they've had to pull a lot out at the end, and that's when Mahomes becomes Mahomes, and they do what they do. So, there's not a lot of style points in this league. They just look at wins and losses, and now that game's gone, nobody's really worried about how it happened. They got it. Now you're on to Green Bay, and you're trying to figure this thing out.
You mentioned it a second ago. The worry, if any, will be on the defensive side of the ball, and not because of players. It's because of all the injuries. With that being said, This is a big game against this Green Bay Packers.
Huge.
Who is the most important defensive player for this Lions team tomorrow night?
I mean, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one, but I would say if you don't have Reader and you don't have Pascal and you don't have Onwuzurike, because none of those guys have practiced this week, so I anticipate when the injured list comes out, which will be any time that they're going to be declared out, it's just not the way it works in the NFL that if guys are DNPs all week that they end up playing. That's just not how it is. So I'm anticipating that those guys in all likelihood don't play. Then all of a sudden you're saying, look, Aleem, you've been playing at a Pro Bowl, maybe all pro level all year. You need to continue to do that. Za'Darius needs you, man. Needs you big time to get after the quarterback and try to make Love uncomfortable. And then everybody up there, job one this week, and it's been talked about a lot out now in the park, is Josh Jacobs. I mean, we can talk about Jordan Love and Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft and all these guys, and they're really good over there. But, man, this thing starts with that running back who's really good. And the Lions have been really good against the run, but you just lost one of the best run stoppers in the NFL if Reader doesn't play in this game. So those guys up front have got to figure it out. And you, in all likelihood, fellas, are going to have 4 guys that just signed with this team less than a week ago in uniform and playing snaps in this game. That's the indication that Dan Campbell's given us. But here's the great thing about Campbell and about Aaron Glenn is they don't lower their expectations. Yeah. They don't change what they anticipate their defense is going to be able to do. They go out there fully believing that they're going to find a way with the bodies that they have to stop the Packers enough to score more points than them and win the game.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Pete Spivak keeps reminding us how important Josh Jacobs is to that Green Bay offense. Last thing for me, and I'm going to step out of everybody's way. You just mentioned them, the 4 players assigned. What impact will these free agents have that the Detroit Lions just signed, if any?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's look, you're talking about guys that obviously have not been at the top of their game. Quan Alexander is a former Pro Bowl player back when, and Jamal Adams was, safety that looked like he was tracking towards huge things in this league and then kind of petered out a little bit. But I think they're looking at just if they can find a way to get them some snaps. Look what they've done with Zeke Turner in there, with David Long in there. Guys that they have picked up from other places, practice squads or unemployed, and gotten them. And these are Maz's kind of guys. They're waivers. And you get them in there. And you know what? You just put them in a position where you're not asking too much of them and tell them, as Dan Campbell said, cut them loose and tell them to go play ball. And I think that's what you'd be looking at with these 4 guys is they're not going to know the whole defensive playbook, and they're not going to expect them to. So put them in a position where they have a limited, scope of responsibilities and let them go out there and try to make some plays. And it's worked so far with some of these guys. I mean, Turner had a big sack last week, did a nice job. Long has played some snaps for him. They see something in each of these guys that they like, and they figure out a way to utilize that part of their game that they like to go out there and make some plays. And I think that's what you'll see again this week. But it's kind of crazy when you think about the number of guys that they have had that have come in that they've needed to pull off the streets or from other organizations to play right away. But you know what? They haven't blinked, and they've made it work.
Dan, I want to ask this question on the heels of what you're talking about right now, because as long as we've seen Dan Campbell here, he has maintained his focus on the next game. And for the very first time that I can recall, in this last week, he kind of broke from that focus and started talking about having to focus a little bit further down this season. Is he talking about making sure this roster has enough bodies for the playoff run? Do you have an idea where he was going with that comment and why he all of a sudden, when we have an 11-1 team and we really probably should be focusing on the playoffs and who the personnel are going to be at that point, why this sudden shift to not just focusing on the Packers but also focusing on January and February of the final of this season?
I want to make sure I understand. Are you talking about when he said we're in playoff mode?
Yes, and he kind of talked about.
Okay, I do think what he's saying is this game. I don't think he's looking past this game, but this game is playoff mode because this game has so much impact on the NFC North. You have a very small amount of wiggle room there with a game plus 1 in hand over Minnesota, 2 games plus 1 in hand against Green Bay. So I think he's just talking about. I don't think he's breaking from his norm. I think he's pure Packers at this point. But I think what he's saying is you're in December now. You're down to the final 5 games of the season. You're down to the point now where you have got to gut it out, win the division. Everything is high leverage. And I think he's just talking about starting with this game right here. But, I mean, we can do it. You got this. You got Buffalo. You got at Chicago. You're at San Francisco and then Minnesota. I mean, these are really tough games. But I think his point is, you know what? You've put yourself in a position to play for big things. The intensity ratchets up now. And this is about playoff positioning, winning a division, things like that. But the intensity is very much playoff-like because Green Bay knows if they don't win this game, they're not winning the NFC North. Their only chance to win the NFC North is to win this game because then they'd have to leapfrog 2 teams if they lose it. So I kind of differ with you a little bit in terms of where he was going with that. That's my take on it. Obviously, he didn't explain it further, but I just took it as, hey, man, we're in December and these are big games. It's playoff mode now.
Hey, Dan, I watched that game like you. I was at the stadium on Thursday, and I was not happy. Even though they won, I really was still in a bad mood, to be honest with you. They got 18 guys on the IR. No one.
Hey, Maz, it's Thanksgiving, man. Lighten up.
I know. I couldn't lighten up. I'm nervous. It's like the whole year I've been like a Sunday driver, sitting back in my seat, listening to my music, relaxing, laughing at the other teams. Now I feel like I'm sitting on 696 at 5:15 in the afternoon. I'm bumper to bumper. I'm pissed. I want to get home, but I don't know if I can get there in time. I just don't know how they're going to freaking finish this year the way they look right now. Honestly, I just
What are you talking about because of injuries? Or are you talking about the way they play?
And I don't like the offense the last 2 weeks.
It's not optimal, but it's not optimal, but what are you going to do?
Nothing.
The guys are hurt. They can't play, so you got to go out there and play. I mean, love you, Maz, but if they had your attitude, they wouldn't be 11-1.
Thank you, Dan.
I mean, you just got to gut it out. I mean, listen. This coach is amazing at setting the tone. You need to listen to him because he's just telling you exactly what they have to do. Nobody's going to feel sorry for them. Nobody's going to come in here and take them lightly because they don't have, outstanding defensive players, a defensive player of the year candidate, one of the best interior tackles in the league, and DJ Reader, their longtime left tackle, and Taylor Decker. I get what you're saying, and is there reason for a level of concern because of the injuries? Yes. But do you roll it up and just say, okay, that's it, I don't know how we're going to get through this? No. You do what they've done to this point. You could have done that when Hutchinson went out, and you thought, man, they'll never have a pass rush without Aiden Hutchinson. You know what? They figured it out. And that's really all you can do. That's every guy in that locker room. It's cliche, but banding together, next guy steps up and plays, and off you go. But you'll never hear the coach give an inch when it comes to that stuff, because as soon as he does, that gives players the ability to give an inch, and they won't do that. And I think that's part of what's made them the team that they are right now. Just keep grinding it out, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. You've got enough players to win. I mean, let's face it, he ran through it the other day, and so I'm paraphrasing but quoting. You still got Brian Branch. You still got, Kirby Joseph. You've still got Carlton Davis. You've still got Aleem McNeil. You still got Zadarius Smith. You still got Terrion Arnold. You still got enough players on this defense to go out there and play. Is it as good as it would have been with everybody healthy? No, but it's what you've got. It's what you're taking into that Green Bay game, and it's all you're taking into that Green Bay game, so figure out a way to make it work.
It's just the offense I'm worried about. I'm not even worried about the defense because AG is a magician right now. I just don't know. I don't like what I've seen the last 2 weeks. I really don't. And I don't know. Has the NFL caught on a little to Ben Johnson?
How many weeks ago was it where they didn't punt? Was that 3 weeks ago?
I know.
Yeah.
Well, in the last 2 weeks.
Was that 3 weeks ago where they didn't punt?
Yeah, but the last 2 weeks, that don't look good the last 2 weeks.
Okay, so, doesn't every offense, we've seen, as Braylon alluded to, Kansas City struggle to win games, scoring 15 or 18 or 20 points or whatever. It happens to everybody. You don't go out there and they're averaging 30.9 points a game. They're the number one scoring offense in the league. And it's not going to be that way every week. But you got to hope it's there when you need it. They've also won 10 in a row, which means they've figured out the down times, and they've figured out a way to get it done and figured out a way to score enough points to beat the other team. I mean, I'm not here to sell you on anything they're doing, Maz. I'm here to show you the body of work and say, I get
see
it.
the body.
Sometimes, sometimes you worry about it when it's not all clicking, but it just doesn't work like that it clicks all the time. And
I realize that.
You know what? Oftentimes we've seen this team when they've needed a drive, they've gotten it, and it's a credit to the players.
Dan, you said it, the body of work. I have an issue with what we call new money Lions fans focusing on the 3% wrong with this team, overlooking the 11-1, 97% of absolute joy that this Lions team has brought to Detroit. It's crazy.
I don't know if it's different in a lot of different places. I think oftentimes you tend to focus on maybe what's worrying you versus what you assume is just okay. And maybe that's part of being a fan, and we all do that to some degree. But, I do think that there are times where you just have to sit back and say, you know what, let's give these guys some credit, and let's give them, a little bit of grace here in that they have been able to figure things out along the way when it hasn't been perfect, whether it was defense, offense, special teams, whatever it was, and just get it done. That's a credit to the players, and that's a credit to the coaching staff. And look, are they up against it a little bit right now? Yeah, they are. But, some of these guys are going to be back. There's no doubt. Look, Reeder's coming back. Pascal's coming back. Onwuzurike, I guess, a little more serious. But we haven't seen him put on IR yet. I haven't seen the moves today. But, anticipate that he's going to be back. So, you know what? Figure it out on Thursday. Then you got a mini bye. You got 10 days to get ready for Buffalo. And you know what? Next week, you'll be telling me you're worried about Buffalo, and I'll be telling you, you know what? You're right, but this team tends to figure it out. So, look, I find it really hard to get that down about a team that's won 10 games in a row and tied a franchise record for winning streak and set a record for the best start in the history of the team. Man, let's get to Thursday night. Let's see what happens, and if they win, great, load it up and go again. If they don't, you figure out what went wrong, get as many guys as you can, and go after the Bills the next week.
Dan, the man, thank you for talking some sense in the Maz. You preaching the gospel right now,
That's
man.
right.
You're my guy, man. But, yes,
you're happy.
Let's talk about the game, because ain't nobody apologizing for us. They got to go out there. They got to find a way to win. You got a big game tomorrow night, big NFC implications in this game.
Huge.
Not just the division, but also the conference as a whole. What do you expect to see from the Lions, and what are some keys to victory, that'll help lead the Lions to a victory against Green Bay?
I do think it is what a couple of you guys have touched on. I think the offense in this game has to lead. I really do. I do think they have to find a way to have one of their bigger games and, maximize possessions and not do what they did against Chicago, which is get into the red zone and settle for 3 points. You score 7 points, and they're a really good red zone team. You play the way they normally do when you get down there against Chicago. That's not even a game. So, instead of what happened in the second half, I'd look more at what happened in the first half because that had the opportunity to be a blowout, and they weren't able to do that. So finish in the red zone, get that offense clicking, make Green Bay chase them. And that's what they've done against some teams this year, like Seattle, like Dallas. They've put them back on their heels. They've made them chase them. And when you do that, maybe you can force Love into making a mistake or Green Bay into doing something they might not normally do. And I think that's how you make another team uncomfortable is you get up 14 on the scoreboard or something along those lines. So to me, what jumps out first is that offense has got to play at maximum capacity. That offense has got to play like we know it's capable of playing and go out there. And we're not asking it to do anything more than we've seen before. Just have a consistent night where you take advantage of your opportunities. And then defensively, look, hold this thing together and find a way to slow down Jacobs and then see if you can get Love to make a mistake. He's not making as many as he did early in the season. So you got to try to get him to make a mistake like he did earlier this year. Listen, this is a tough game, guys. It's supposed to be. This team's won a lot of games. Green Bay's really good. And that's this is a heck of a matchup. This is what it's all about. This is going to be fun.
Dan, some people make comments about Jahmyr Gibbs' touches in the second half and how there weren't as many as in the first half. And then I remember when I was with the Jets, one of the big things of the offensive coordinator who won't be named was There's so many players on the team.
Brian Schottenheimer.
Thank you, man.
It's that guy. But you had Daniel Tomlinson, Sean Green, Braylon Edwards, Santonio Holmes, Dustin Keller, Brad Smith. So he's always trying to, I got to make sure this guy gets his touches. I got to make sure this guy gets his touches. I got to make sure this guy gets his touches. Is there any of that you think in Ben Johnson's mind where I want to make sure David Montgomery gets his, Jameer, and et cetera, Laporta? Or is it just, hey, look, what the play calls for, what the situation calls for?
Yeah, Braylon, I think that history shows us that he just does whatever he feels like they need to do in that moment. And if he's got somebody that's hot, he'll stick with them. But I don't think he's somebody that looks down at his stat sheet and says, you know what? I mean, Sam Laporta is a great example. Sam Laporta has not had the frequency of touches that we saw last year when he was a rookie, but he's been there when they needed him. Obviously scored 2 touchdowns the other day. I just think Ben Johnson does whatever he feels like is best for this offense in the moment. And, man, I feel like we talked about this earlier in the year, but when you have Montgomery, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, J-Mo, on down the line to Sam Laporta, to Tim Patrick, to Khalif when he's in there, man, there's no way everybody's going to get all theirs every week. It's just not going to happen. But I think he does a good job of balancing that out. I think the stats bear that out with the running back and the way that they've split the load this year. I think, if anything, guys have been there when he needs them. I mean, Tim Patrick had a catch on each of their touchdown drives against the Jets, had a big 2nd and 23 catch against the Bears this past week for a first down on a drive that they end up getting a field goal on. So, man, I think it's less to me about making sure everybody has, okay, he's got 10, he's got 10, he's got 6, he's got 6. It's less about that than the whole, are you being productive as an offense? And I think more often than not this year, Ben's found a way to make them productive. But I said at the beginning of the year, I thought this would be a fantasy team's owner nightmare because there's so many different guys on this team that can light it up that it's just not possible that they all do it every week.
Dan, you mentioned Tim Patrick, who's been a great addition to this team. Josh Reynolds was just waived by the Denver Broncos. What do you think the likelihood of seeing him back here in Detroit would be? Yeah,
I don't know what his physical situation is. I mean, obviously, he has had some injuries. He got shot on top of that. I have no idea what his ability to play is. And I don't know where this coaching staff is right now in terms of adding anybody. Patrick has been exactly what they were looking for. I think he's been a great teammate. I think they love him in that locker room. And you're starting to see him get more comfortable now and make more plays. I mean, on top of being a new Lion, he hasn't played in 2 years because of injuries. So I saw that and the thought crossed my mind. And the first thing is, I don't know what his physical situation is. Second thing is, I feel like they're pretty comfortable with what they've got going. If anything, that receiver that they're looking to add now is a punt return guy as well, with Khalif being out. I anticipate Mo Alexander was put back on practice squad unless they plan on using Amon-Ra back there this week. Alexander will probably be back up to field punts again. So I don't know if he fits exactly what they're looking for right now.
Dan Miller, we appreciate you for joining us every Wednesday. It's so funny. You're so good at what you do for the Lions. We always forget to mention Fox 2's Dan Miller.
Yes, sir.
He's pretty good at that job as well.
Hey, the game's on Fox 2
I appreciate
tomorrow.
you guys.
If my girl doesn't sell these tickets by
tomorrow we are.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, you will see Braylon and Ryan on there.
Yeah.
7 o'clock, we got the pregame show, 7 to 8 live from Ford Field. And then everybody should know the game is on Fox 2 tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. We have the Amazon broadcast. So I think that I've got the feedback I've gotten from a lot of people on X or whatever it is that they're happy about that because maybe not everybody has Amazon. So it is on Fox 2 tomorrow night. Tune in. We'd love to see you. 7 o'clock pregame show and postgame show right after the game.
Dan, enjoy your night tonight, but I really hope you enjoy tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah.
You, me both, buddy. I appreciate you guys.
Dan.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.